Well, good afternoon, Amy. How are you doing today? I think I may have a sound issue because I cannot hear you.
Yeah, this is what happens when you don't unmute the button.
There you go.
Okay, so we are here. The world is on fire, cocktails and current events, and we are here to talk. Let's just jump right into Iran because that is some pretty interesting big news.
And it is evolving constantly. So I don't think I'll be treading any new ground by do it with a quick synopsis of the MOU and how we got here. Now, there's been a whole lot of analysis and input on this, and I'm definitely in the consensus that says, hey, we didn't really gain anything on this. We effectively stopped fighting because it was not a peace treaty. It was a memorandum of understanding to continue the ceasefire. So we're ceasing fire, although there is still fire going on, and I'll get to that in a minute. And in exchange, we will go back to an open Strait of Hormuz and not blocking the ports, the Iranian ports. But now Iran gets to sell its oil, and some of its assets are unfrozen. And they have a pathway to this $300 billion fund to rebuild their economy. But that doesn't touch any of the issues that we started this war over. If you remember at the very beginning, we were talking about unconditional surrender. We were talking about regime change in which Trump would get to select the new leaders of Iran. Neither of those have happened. And of course, the big one, the nuclear program, their missile program, and the support for regional terrorists. Now, you can split hairs a little bit about regime change, but even if you want to say the regime has changed, it is far less friendly now than it was before. So we are back to where we were on February 27th with a worse regime, and now Iran has access to more money. The MOU that we have right now, it explicitly says that Lebanon's sovereignty borders will be respected, and that there will be a ceasefire in Lebanon as well. Now, neither Israel nor Hezbollah signed on to that. So Iran can rightly point and say, hey, until Israel goes out, you're not in compliance. Israel and Hezbollah have been exchanging fire. Who fired first is impossible to say. But the fact is that they have been exchanging fire. So their respective sponsors, the United States for Israel and Iran for Hezbollah, either aren't exerting enough pressure or can't control their respective parties. So the ceasefire is on shaky ground. Fortunately, I will say that the Vance is in Geneva and Switzerland this weekend to kick off talks. Iran is already threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz again. So it is evolving by the minute. When Iran threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz, Trump immediately said, you can't impose fees. If anyone's going to impose fees, it's going to be us, which I find interesting. But that's where we are. So we might have a ceasefire. Iran might have a path to economic viability and a reduced nuclear capability, although they reiterated in the MOU, it reiterated that they won't build a nuclear weapon because they've said that many, many times before. But we don't trust them, so we need some sort of verification method that hasn't worked out. And we haven't even started talking about, like I said, their missile program or their support for Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, all those players.
Or their treatment of women and basic human rights there. And so already since the new regime, there was a famous singer there, and she went on stage. She is already now going up for trial for singing without wearing a hijab and singing solo and in public. So we did little for the people. One thing I want to table but mention here is there is a movement also in Congress where Congress is threatening to seize the budget right now, for lack of a better term, of Hegseth and the Pentagon travel until they get reports, particularly in Iran when it came to the bombing of the girls' school. Because, once again, when we're saying we're going in to save women and children and we bomb children, this is the opposite of what we're trying to do. And the old wars, back when I was in the stuff, First and Second Gulf War was very much the time when we talked about hearts and minds, and the way to win the hearts and minds is not to bomb a girls' school.
Yeah, and on that line, so I mean, mistakes happen, and it's absolutely tragic. Not that I condone it or want that anything like that to happen. It's a terrible tragedy. But when you make a mistake, you need to take ownership of it. One of the reasons that we are not a party to the International Criminal Court is because we have said repeatedly that we will police our own, and that if mistakes are made, we will address them and we will hold people accountable when crimes are committed. So when you see the administration that claims to be the most transparent administration in history, not if they have reviewed it or investigated it, they haven't published anything, and then not taking any sort of accountability or responsibility for it. And if somebody made an error that is worth prosecution, then prosecuting them, that flies in the face of when we say that we are above the International Criminal Court because we take care of our own, we police our own.
Right. And so Trump did say at the G7 summit that it was sitting on a desk, but it still hasn't made its way to Congress. So lots going on there, but it's also tied to the boats and the ships and everything. So we're going to get to that. Let's go up to Europe now and let's discuss the G7 summit that was held in France. Of course, the actual peace signing was supposed to be Switzerland, but ended up getting switched to France really quick. And then there's the big Italian scandals. So whichever one, or you can always just go with Ukraine. Pick anything.
So G7, Trump attended, and of course he took the opportunity to lecture Europe again. Even his bigger fans in Europe are distancing themselves, and this refers to the Italian piece that you were talking about. Prime Minister, I don't remember her name off the top of my head. She and Trump have had a back and forth, and she had traditionally been one of Trump's closer supporters in Europe, and now she's distancing herself. I think they're just sick of the administration lecturing Europe. And not actually doing anything other than trying to attack immigrants, both in the United States and Europe. It's just that seems to be their one note.
Yeah, so not a very successful G7 summit. Lots of friction coming out of that G7 summit.
So I will say, on the positive side of the G7, there was a joint MOU, or a joint not MOU, but a joint memorandum that was released that all parties signed, and it did express pretty unequivocal support for Ukraine. And the fact that the United States, with Trump there, was willing to sign that is pretty significant. So pivoting to Ukraine, Ukraine has been striking inside of Russia pretty aggressively, including one of the big ones most recently, destroying a bunch of fuel refineries right outside Moscow and leading to some pretty nasty toxic weather falling on the Muscovites. So Zelensky has said he's going to take the fight to Putin and to the Russian population, and he's following through. So that is demonstrating to the world that Ukraine is not going to capitulate. If anyone was still under that delusion, the Ukrainian defense industrial base has certainly ramped up to the point that it is probably going to be one of the leading technological bases for unmanned aerial vehicles, counter UAVs, and then counter ballistic missiles for some time to come. Their new systems are cheaper, are more effective, and have been battle proven. While we're still using Patriots to shoot down $30,000 Shahed drones, they've got something that's way cheaper and way more effective.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that, Nick. I wrote a short post this week about Ukraine is actually working and training with Taiwan, and their citizenry are learning how to use drones, very similar to how Ukraine has effectively been able to use drones.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely astonishing. So the Ukraine without a navy has been able to bring the Russian Black Sea Fleet to its knees by using sea drones. So if the global navies aren't like waking up to that and planning for it, then they're already behind. It's equivalent to the advent of the ironclad and then the advent of the battleship. It really is a sea change for naval warfare.
Great. Anything else you want to cover? France, Italy, any place in Europe before we move over into Central America?
Enjoying the World Cup, but that's really global. So yeah, let's move over Central America.
Okay, so we're over in Central America. I just wanted to start with going back to what I tabled, which is Congress had tied both the operations that have happened, the different vessels that were struck, and getting that information as well as Iran together. So kind of combining those two, where Congress is demanding, and this is actually bipartisan, which is something we haven't seen in the U.S. in a while, of them demanding the ability to do their congressional oversight. And my favorite topic is Cuba. So let's go ahead and do that.
It really is. Yeah. So conditions in Cuba continue to be miserable. They've been without any measurable power for a very long time now. The Cuban legislature has passed recently, I think within just last week or so, a measure to try to liberalize their economy a little bit. And I personally think that it's probably as much to try to placate the Trump administration from taking more aggressive action as it is to actually fix their economy. This is definitely some things that they should have been doing a lot more recently than now. Their economy's been in really bad straits for a very long time, but because they have been subsidized by the Soviet Union and Russia and China and Venezuela for so very long, they've been able to get away with it, and they just can't anymore. Now, it doesn't help that we are literally starving them of fuel, and that is literally causing people to die in hospitals. They can't move food, so there's a hunger issue. So the Cubans are in a really, really bad situation, and unfortunately, it's the Cuban people that are paying for this, while the communist leadership probably is not.
Yeah, definitely a lot going on there in Cuba, and it would be wonderful to actually see some progress and at least some demands of what Cuba could meet for this to go away, because it's awfully hard to meet demands when you don't know what those demands are.
Yeah, I certainly expected if the peace holds with Iran rather, and we are able to actually measurably move toward a lasting peace treaty with them, I fully expect Cuba to be the next major target in the Trump administration's crosshairs. So as soon as they can turn their full attention, I fully suspect that Cuba is going to get the wire brush a lot harder.
Yeah, and I think that people forget that whole shield of America is that every time I hear this, I think the universe is still going on in the background, even though it's not getting a whole lot of attention in the media. I did see some different operations going down in Ecuador, and things that just are not really bubbling up to the top.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, because I just saw Kristi Noem in news for something completely unrelated. I don't recall what it is off the top of my head, but it was definitely not Shield Americas, and it reminded me, oh yeah, she's supposed to be leading this other organization and effort, and I haven't been tracking that. So I have been remiss in my duties of keeping track of Latin America as well.
Yeah, definitely Latin and South America. When you and I were talking over a year ago now, and the Newsweek had put out an article on the Don Road Doctrine and the splitting up the world, and it seemed very far-fetched. And now, as we watch it and we see the Shield of Americas, I think we are, and the push away from Europe. It is definitely a changing world, and I am really grateful that we do this. I know that we are running out of time. Anything you want to add that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
Oh, gee, it's been such a dynamic week. Just keeping up with Iran alone was been a full-time job this past week, and it's every hour there's a new headline. So it's a high adventure, and for international relations geeks like me, it's in a sick way a lot of fun.
Yeah, it really is. And on the World Cup, lots of interesting dynamics going on there. And with that, I'm just going to leave it. And Nick, thank you so much for a fast-paced. I think we covered everything that we intended, cocktails and current events, and hope to see everybody next week. Please like, please subscribe, and please send us your ideas.
Cheers.